Tonight's story is called What Winter Nights Were Really Like for Medieval Peasants. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to relax your shoulders and let your breathing slow naturally. If you enjoy calm, slow history designed to help you sleep, consider subscribing and joining us for more peaceful journeys into the past. And before we travel back in time, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from tonight? Now, let us step quietly into a freezing winter night, somewhere in medieval Europe. The sun has already disappeared behind the low winter horizon. In the countryside of medieval Europe, darkness comes quickly in winter. There are no street lamps, no glowing windows across distant houses, only open land, frozen fields, and scattered wooden huts standing alone against the cold. The air is sharp, biting. Each breath leaves the mouth in pale clouds of mist. Inside one small peasant hut, the day is not truly finished yet. The hut is made from timber beams, packed with mud and straw between them. The roof is thatched, heavy with old frost. A thin curl of smoke escapes through a small opening above. Inside, the space is dim. The only light comes from a low fire burning at the centre of the room. There is no chimney as we imagine today. Smoke drifts upward, slowly filling the upper part of the hut before escaping through gaps in the thatch. The smell of wood smoke hangs permanently in the air. It clings to clothing, to hair, to the walls. The floor is not wood. It is hard-packed earth. Cold beneath bare feet, scattered straw lies across it, both for insulation and for absorbing moisture. In one corner, a wooden bench. In another, a rough table made from thick planks. Near the fire, a simple iron pot hangs over low flames. The evening meal has already been eaten. Dark bread, a thin stew of root vegetables, perhaps cabbage, perhaps onions. Meat is rare in winter. Now, the real challenge begins. Night. Winter night. And in medieval times, night is not entertainment. It is endurance. The fire must last. The cold must be kept away. Outside, the wind begins to rise. It moves across frozen fields, unhindered. It pushes against the walls of the hut. The wooden beams creak slightly. Inside, the peasant family prepares for sleep. There is no separate bedroom, no hallway. Everyone shares the same space. Privacy does not exist here, only survival. The fire is carefully adjusted, not too large. Wood is precious. It must last until morning. Too much wood burned now means freezing before dawn. Too little means bitter cold before midnight. It is a careful balance. One log is shifted gently, another small branch added. The flames glow brighter for a moment, then settle again into steady orange embers. The light flickers across the walls, shadows stretch and shrink. Tools hanging from pegs seem to move in the dancing light. A wooden bowl is placed upside down on the table, a clay cup rinsed with the last of the water. Water itself is limited. In freezing temperatures, it must be carried daily from a distant well or stream. Sometimes, the surface is frozen solid. Outside the hut, animals shuffle inside a small attached shelter. A cow, perhaps a goat. They're kept close not only for protection, but for warmth. Their body heat helps slightly against the winter air. The door is thick wood, heavy. A simple wooden bar is placed across it. There are no locks as we know them. Security depends on isolation, and neighbours far apart. The last tasks of the night are slow, deliberate. There is no hurry, because once darkness fully settles, there is nothing more to do, no books to read. Most peasants cannot read, no candles to waste for idle light. Candles are expensive, saved for important needs. The fire is the only light, and when it dims, so does the world. Straw mattresses are pulled closer to the hearth. They are simple sacks stuffed with dry straw, lumpy, uneven, not soft by modern standards. Blankets are made of coarse wool, heavy, scratchy against skin, but warm, and warmth is everything. One by one, bodies lower onto the straw, boots are removed, clothes often stay on. Removing too many layers means waking colder. The air near the roof of the hut is warmer because smoke rises. So sometimes, sleeping platforms are built slightly elevated, but not always. Tonight, frost already forms along the inside edges of the small window opening. Yes, frost inside. That is how cold it becomes. The fire crackles softly. Outside, the wind presses harder. A long whistle passes through gaps in the walls. The thatched roof rustles faintly. The cow shifts its weight again. A quiet, low sound escapes it. Inside, breathing begins to slow. But medieval sleep is not like modern sleep. It is not 8 uninterrupted hours. It is often divided. Historians call it segmented sleep. People fall asleep shortly after darkness, then wake again around midnight, then sleep again until dawn, because nights are long, and bodies adjust naturally. For now, eyelids grow heavy. The only movement is the shifting of embers, and the faint crack of wood splitting in heat. There are no glowing screens, no distant traffic sounds, only wind, wood, breathing. Cold air seeps slowly through walls, but the wool blankets trap warmth close to the body. Hands tuck beneath arms, feet pressed together, sharing warmth. Some nights are worse than others. When snow falls heavily, the world outside becomes silent. Tonight, there is only wind. The first hours of winter night stretch ahead, long, dark, unheated, but ordinary. This is not an extraordinary night. It is simply a winter night, and for medieval peasants, this is life. The fire settles lower. Orange turns deeper red. Embers glow steady. Outside, frost thickens across frozen fields. The moon rises behind thin clouds. Its pale light spills faintly across the land. But inside the hut, darkness thickens. The last visible shapes fade. Only the faintest red glow remains at the centre of the room. Breathing slows further. The body curls instinctively, conserving heat. The night deepens, and somewhere beyond the fields, a distant wolf howls, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to remind. That warmth is fragile, and winter is long. Slowly, very slowly, sleep takes hold. Tonight, we continue our slow journey into the quiet, shadowy world of medieval winter evenings. Imagine again that the sun has already disappeared behind low grey clouds. The wind hums softly through bare tree branches. The fields are frozen, hard as stone. And inside a small timber and thatch cottage, a family of peasants prepares to endure another long winter night. There is no electricity, no glowing screens, no central heating, only darkness, cold air, and time. Let us settle gently into that space. The cottage is small, much smaller than most modern bedrooms. Its walls are made of wattle and daub, thin wooden strips woven together and packed with mud, clay and straw. In summer, this construction helps keep the interior somewhat cool. In winter, however, it struggles to keep out the cold. Wind finds its way through cracks. The door does not seal tightly. It is a simple wooden plank door, perhaps reinforced with iron nails if the family can afford it. Around the edges, tiny draughts slip inside. The thatched roof above provides some insulation, but snow and frost still chill the structure. The floor is not wood. It is hard packed earth. Over time, layers of straw, rushes and plant material are scattered across it. This covering absorbs moisture and provides slight warmth underfoot. During winter, fresh straw might be added more often, not because it smells pleasant, but because it creates insulation. The fire is the heart of the cottage. In poorer homes there may be no proper chimney. Instead, smoke escapes slowly through a hole in the roof, or simply seeps through the thatch. This means the interior air is thick and hazy. Eyes water. Lungs burn slightly. Soot gathers on the beams above. The fire burns low tonight. Fuel is precious. Firewood must last the entire season. Families gather fallen branches throughout autumn. If they are fortunate, they may have rights to collect wood from nearby forests. If not, they must rely on dried peat, twigs, or scraps. The flames are not large or dramatic. They are carefully controlled, slow, and economical. The warmth they provide is limited. Only those sitting closest to the hearth truly feel it. The rest of the room remains cold. As darkness deepens, the family gathers. The father sits on a rough wooden stool, mending a tool handle with careful movements. The mother kneels near the hearth, stirring a simple pot of stew. Perhaps barley, perhaps cabbage, perhaps a few beans. Meat is rare in winter, unless preserved from autumn slaughter. Children sit nearby. They are not entertained by toys or books. Most cannot read. Instead, they listen, or they help with small tasks, untangling wool, cleaning dried vegetables, holding tools steady. Winter nights are long, very long. Without artificial light, activities must be done close to the fire or by the dim glow of a tallow candle. Candles are expensive. Most peasants do not burn them freely. A candle might be saved for specific work that requires precision, sewing, repairing clothing, or tending to illness. Otherwise, they rely on firelight. Firelight flickers. It creates moving shadows on the walls. Shapes seem to stretch and bend. In a quiet medieval cottage, those shadows could feel alive. Outside, the wind whistles. Sometimes animals cry in the distance, perhaps a fox or an owl. The sound carries easily in the cold air. For a child lying on straw bedding, these noises can feel mysterious, even frightening. Remember, medieval peasants had a worldview filled with unseen forces, spirits, saints, demons, omens. Winter darkness was not just physical, it was symbolic. Long nights were often associated with danger, wandering spirits, or divine tests of endurance. And yet, for most families, these nights were simply ordinary, cold, quiet, repetitive. After the evening meal, which is modest, the family does not immediately sleep. Sleep in the medieval period was often divided. Historians sometimes describe first sleep and second sleep. After several hours of rest, people might wake naturally in the middle of the night. During this waking period, they might pray, talk quietly, or simply lie still before drifting back into second sleep. But before first sleep comes preparation. Bedding is simple. There are no thick mattresses. Instead, straw-filled sacks or piles of rushes serve as bedding. Some families share sleeping spaces. Body heat is valuable. Children may sleep together. In colder conditions, even animals might be kept close or within part of the dwelling for warmth. Imagine lying down on straw. You feel the uneven texture beneath you. It rustles softly as you shift. Your blanket, if you have one, is made of coarse wool. It scratches slightly against your skin. The air is cold when you breathe in. Your face might be chilly, even if your body is warm under shared blankets. And yet, this is normal. You have known nothing else. But winter nights were not entirely idle. These hours were often used for quiet labour. Spinning wool is one of the most common tasks. A spindle turns slowly between fingers. Wool is drawn out carefully, twisted into thread. This work can be done by firelight. It requires patience rather than strength. Women and older children might spin for hours. The soft whir of the spindle becomes a kind of rhythm, almost meditative. Some men carve wooden handles, repair baskets, or patch farming tools. Winter is the season of maintenance. The fields rest under frost, so tools must be prepared for spring. Occasionally there is storytelling. Stories are not grand performances. They are familiar tales passed down orally. Legends of saints, local folklore, moral lessons wrapped in simple narratives. A grandfather might describe a harsh winter from his youth. A mother might recount a tale of a wandering traveller who found shelter during a snowstorm. The stories are practical. They teach caution, endurance, faith. Laughter is not absent, but it is quiet, controlled. Energy must be conserved. The cold intensifies after midnight. Fires burn lower. Coals glow red beneath ash. Someone wakes briefly to stir the embers, adding a small piece of wood to keep warmth alive until morning. Completely extinguishing the fire would mean starting again from scratch, difficult and risky in damp conditions. The smell inside the cottage is layered. Smoke, wool, earth, cooked grains, human presence. It is not unpleasant to those who live there. It is simply familiar. Outside, frost gathers thicker. If snow falls, it muffles sound. The world becomes incredibly quiet. A medieval winter night during snowfall would feel almost suspended, as though time itself slowed. Inside, breathing becomes the dominant sound. Slow inhales, soft exhalations. A child shifts. Straw rustles. The wind pushes lightly against the walls. Illness is a constant concern during winter. Colds, fevers, coughs. These spread easily in close quarters. There are no modern medicines. Remedies might include herbal infusions, prayers, or simple rest. If someone coughs persistently in the night, others may wake in concern. Illness in winter can be dangerous. The body already struggles against cold and limited nutrition. Nutrition itself is modest. By late winter, food stores run low, root vegetables soften, grain supplies shrink. Hunger can become sharper as weeks pass. This makes winter nights feel longer. An empty stomach does not always allow easy sleep. And yet, people endure. They endure because they must. Let us slow down further. Picture a single moment around 2 a.m. The cottage is nearly silent. The fire is reduced to glowing embers. Moonlight filters faintly through a small shutter or gap in the wall. A peasant wakes briefly. There is no clock. Time is sensed by habit and darkness. He listens. The family is asleep. He hears wind outside. For a moment there is nothing to do, nowhere to go, no distraction, just stillness. This kind of stillness is rare in the modern world, but in medieval winter it was common, and perhaps strangely peaceful. Winter nights also shaped social rhythms. Because travel after dark was dangerous, especially in winter, most people stayed within their village. Roads could be icy. Bandits were rumoured, even if uncommon. Without lanterns or street lighting, navigating open land at night was risky. So communities became more inward during winter. Occasionally neighbours might gather in one cottage for shared work. This practice, sometimes known in later periods as spinning bees, allowed people to combine labour with companionship. Several families in one small space, more warmth, more conversation, shared stories. These gatherings reduced isolation. But they were not daily events. Most nights remained family-centred. Religion also played a role in winter evenings. Prayer was woven into daily life. Before sleep, families might recite simple prayers together. Not elaborate ceremonies, just familiar words spoken softly. Faith provided structure. Winter, with its darkness and uncertainty, reinforced reliance on spiritual comfort. The cycle of seasons reminded peasants that hardship would eventually give way to renewal. Even the longest night would slowly shorten after the solstice. But in January or February that renewal still feels distant. The night still stretches long. Let us consider sound again. Without modern background noise, no engines, no electronics, no distant traffic, medieval nights had a different acoustic quality. Silence was deeper. Individual sounds stood out clearly, a log cracking in the hearth, wind brushing thatch, an animal shifting in a stall, a distant dog barking. Each sound carried meaning. Each sound was noticed. This heightened awareness shaped how people experienced darkness. They were not dulled by constant noise. Their senses were tuned to subtle changes, Now imagine the coldest nights, the kind where breath is visible indoors. Water left in a bucket near the door develops a thin layer of ice by morning. On such nights, extra straw is added beneath bedding. Cloaks may be worn to sleep. The entire family huddles closer. The fire cannot fully defeat the cold, but it creates a centre, a glowing symbol of survival. There is something deeply human about gathering around a flame in winter. It connects medieval peasants to countless generations before them. Fire as protection, fire as comfort, fire as life. As dawn approaches, there is no sudden brightness. Light returns gradually. A faint greyness seeps into the room. Roosters may crow. Someone stirs. The longest part of the night has passed, and with it, another small victory. Survival in winter was not dramatic. It was cumulative. Night after night. Day after day. Each morning meant the family had endured once more. Winter nights for medieval peasants were not romantic. They were not filled with endless storytelling or festive warmth. They were repetitive, quiet, often uncomfortable. But within that simplicity existed resilience, a rhythm of life shaped by firelight, shared space, whispered prayers, and the slow turning of seasons. The fire is low again. The air is cold. The night stretches long across frozen fields. But tonight, we move deeper into winter, beyond the ordinary chill, into the kind of cold that tests survival. Because not every medieval winter was simply uncomfortable. Some were dangerous, some were remembered for generations. Let us slowly step into one of those harsher seasons. It begins gradually. Autumn had seemed normal. The harvest was modest but acceptable. Grain was stored. Root vegetables were buried in pits. Salted meat hung from rafters. But then the first frost came early, colder than expected. The ground hardened quickly. Livestock required more fodder than planned. Wood supplies diminished faster than anticipated, and then the snow arrived. Not a light dusting, but heavy, thick snow that covered roads and fields, bending tree branches low. At first, the village admired its beauty. Snow can feel magical, even in medieval times, but beauty fades when it lingers. By midwinter, paths between villages become difficult to travel. Carts cannot move easily through deep snow. River crossings freeze unevenly, too thin in some places, dangerously thick in others. Trade slows. If a village depends on nearby markets for salt, grain or tools, those supplies may not arrive on time. Isolation grows. Winter nights, already long, now feel heavier. Inside the cottage, the fire must burn longer to keep out severe cold, but burning more wood means depleting reserves quickly. The father counts the remaining stack of logs carefully. Each piece is considered before it is placed on the hearth. The mother measures grain more strictly. Meals shrink slightly, just a little at first. Thinner porridge, smaller portions of bread, more water added to stew. The children notice, even if nothing is said aloud. When temperatures drop significantly, daily tasks become harder. Water must be fetched from wells or streams, but ice forms thick layers. Breaking ice requires effort. Repeated strikes with a tool. Hands become numb quickly. Metal tools sting when touched. Clothing, though layered, is not fully protective. Wool cloaks trap warmth, but become stiff when damp. Leather boots harden in frost. And yet, tasks must continue. Animals still need feeding. Chickens still lay, though less frequently. Cows produce less milk in winter. If fodder is scarce, livestock weaken. Winter nights become more anxious when animals begin to suffer. Because animals are wealth. They are survival. Losing one during winter can threaten the entire household's future. Let us move inside again. The cottage is colder now. The wind outside has sharpened. It whistles more aggressively against the walls. Snow piles against the door, forming a barrier. The fire crackles louder, not because it is larger, but because the wood is dry and brittle. Everyone sits closer than before. Conversations are quieter. There is a certain tension in harsh winters, not panic, but awareness. Every cough is noticed, every unusual silence from the animal shed is heard, every creak of the roof under snow weight draws attention. Now imagine a night when the temperature falls drastically, so low that frost creeps along the inside of the walls. Yes, inside. Thin crystals form where breath meets cold surfaces. Water stored in clay containers develops ice rims. Blankets feel less effective. Children curl tighter into parents. Body heat becomes the most reliable source of warmth. On such nights, sleep is lighter. People wake more often. The fire must be checked repeatedly. If embers fade completely, restarting in extreme cold is slow and miserable. Flint and steel must strike just right. Dry tinder must be protected carefully from dampness. The simple act of maintaining flame becomes critical. Food stores shrink steadily. By late winter, root vegetables begin to spoil if storage conditions were imperfect. Mold can form. Some must be discarded. Grain, if infested by rodents earlier in the season, may be reduced more than expected. Hunger sharpens emotions. Irritability increases. But medieval peasants were accustomed to cycles of scarcity. They understood that late winter, often called the hungry gap in later historical studies, was the hardest period. The body feels weaker, energy drops. Winter nights feel longer when the stomach is not fully satisfied. Let us pause on one particular scene. It is the coldest week of the season. Snow has fallen continuously for days. Travel is impossible. Inside the cottage, the air smells stronger, less ventilation due to sealed shutters. The family eats a thin barley broth. There is no meat left. The father stares into the fire longer than usual. He calculates silently. How many weeks until early spring greens? How much grain remains? Can the remaining wood last? The mother notices his silence but says nothing. Children sense tension, even if they do not understand numbers. Outside, the world feels distant. No visitors, no market sounds, only wind and white silence. In extreme winters, roofs could collapse under heavy snow. Thatch, though thick, can absorb moisture. If snow melts slightly and refreezes, weight increases. At night, families sometimes wake to strange groaning sounds from overhead beams. Each creak feels alarming. The father might step outside into bitter cold to knock snow from edges of the roof with a long pole. Imagine stepping barefoot into boots stiff with frost, pulling on a cloak cold as stone, opening the door to a blast of icy air that steals breath. The sky above is sharp and clear, stars glittering intensely. Snow reflects moonlight so brightly that the ground glows faintly. It is beautiful and painfully cold. Sometimes in very harsh winters, livestock die. A lamb too weak, a chicken frozen overnight. These losses are not dramatic scenes of grief. They are quiet, practical. The animal may be butchered quickly if possible, nothing wasted. But such moments deepen the seriousness of winter nights. Each loss reminds the family how fragile their situation is. Illness during extreme cold spreads faster. Close quarters and weakened immune systems create risk. A simple cough can become dangerous. There are no antibiotics. Herbal remedies, thyme, honey, garlic, may be used if available. Prayers grow longer when someone develops fever. At night, the entire household listens to laboured breathing. The fire burns lower. Fear moves silently in the dark. Not loud fear, but steady concern. And yet, even during harsh winters, life does not stop entirely. Small routines continue. Tools are repaired. Wool is spun. Clothing is patched carefully to conserve heat. Stories are told again, perhaps about winters even worse than this one. Remember the year the river froze solid. Remember when the snow lasted until planting time. Memory becomes comfort. If others survived before, survival feels possible now. Now let us imagine a rare but documented phenomenon in medieval Europe. a winter so severe that rivers freeze completely for weeks. Children, cautiously supervised, may step onto the frozen surface near the bank. The ice creaks beneath weight. Adults test thickness carefully. Crossing a frozen river shortens travel, but risk remains. At night, the frozen river changes sound. Instead of flowing water, there are cracking noises as ice expands and contracts. These sounds echo through the dark. To someone lying awake inside a cottage, such sounds can feel unsettling, like distant thunder trapped beneath the ground. Winter nights also alter perception of time. Without busy agricultural labour, days seem slower, but harsh conditions make each hour heavier. When survival tasks increase, fetching water through ice, reinforcing doors against wind, rationing food, evenings feel less restful. Fatigue accumulates. The body burns more calories to stay warm, yet food intake drops. Sleep can become shallow. Dreams may feel vivid, perhaps influenced by hunger or cold. Some medieval writings describe intense winter dreams, visions interpreted as spiritual signs. In a world deeply connected to religious belief, unusual dreams during long cold nights carried meaning. Let us slow again. Picture one final deep winter night. Snow has stopped. The sky is clear. The temperature is at its lowest. Inside the cottage, everyone sleeps close together. The fire has burned down to a faint red glow. Outside, frost sparkles under starlight. The village is silent. No dogs bark. No carts move. Even wind is still. In this silence, there is a strange peace. Harsh winter strips away distraction. What remains is elemental. Cold, fire, breath, family. For medieval peasants, this simplicity was not poetic. It was reality. And yet, there is something steady about it. A rhythm repeated year after year. Winter threatens, but winter also passes. Even the harshest cold cannot last forever. Eventually, subtle signs of change appear. Days lengthen by minutes. The sun rises slightly earlier. Icicles drip slowly during midday. Snow softens, but that is for later. For now, we remain in the deep cold, listening to the quiet, feeling the weight of heavy blankets, watching embers pulse gently in darkness. Winter nights for medieval peasants were not only about boredom or quiet routine. Sometimes they were about endurance, measured, careful, unspoken endurance. And in that endurance, community survived centuries of unpredictable seasons. The wind is softer tonight. The snow outside lies still against the cottage walls. Inside, the fire glows gently, not roaring, not dramatic, just steady. We have explored the cold, the hunger, the danger. Now we turn inward. Because winter nights were not only about weather, they were about people. When darkness lasted for long hours, when families were confined to one small room, when privacy barely existed, relationships changed. Let us step quietly into that shared space. A medieval peasant cottage was usually a single main room. One room for cooking, one room for eating, one room for working, one room for sleeping. Everything happened here. In warmer months, life spilled outdoors. Children ran through fields. Adults worked from sunrise to sunset. The home was a resting place more than a constant environment. But in winter, the cottage became the entire world, for weeks at a time. This closeness shaped family bonds in ways we rarely experience today. Imagine a family of 6, father, mother, grandmother, 3 children, all within perhaps 20 square meters of space. During daylight hours, they sit near the hearth for warmth. At night, they sleep close together for shared body heat. There are no separate bedrooms, no doors to close for privacy, no quiet corners that truly belong to one person. Every sigh is heard, every whisper carries, every disagreement lingers in the air, and yet This constant proximity also builds deep familiarity. Family members know one another's rhythms intimately. They recognize footsteps without looking. They know who turns restlessly in sleep. They sense mood changes in silence. Winter nights create longer conversations, not dramatic ones, but steady, small exchanges. The father might speak about the coming planting season, what he hopes to grow, what repairs are still needed. The mother might recount memories from her childhood village. Grandparents, if present, become storytellers. Children ask questions. Was it colder when you were young? Did wolves ever come near the village? Did the river freeze like this before? Stories are not entertainment in the modern sense. They are threads connecting generations. Winter nights give those threads time to weave tightly. But closeness is not always peaceful. Tension grows more easily in confined spaces. If food is scarce, anxiety rises. If someone is ill, worry spreads. If wood supplies seem low, fear hides behind quiet expressions. A small disagreement over chores can feel larger when there is no escape. There is no stepping into another room to cool down, no solitary walk down a lit street at midnight. Instead, conflicts must soften naturally. Silence often resolves arguments, or time, or shared necessity, because survival depends on cooperation. In winter especially, division is dangerous. Let us focus on children. For them, winter nights are both restrictive and magical. Restrictive because they cannot roam freely. Magical because firelight creates moving shapes on walls. A simple hand gesture becomes a shadow animal. A flicker of flame transforms into a giant dancing figure. In a world without screens, imagination is easily stirred by darkness. Children may invent quiet games using simple objects, bits of wood, scraps of cloth, carved figurines if available. They learn patience. They learn to listen. They observe adults carefully. Winter becomes a season of watching and absorbing. Marriage relationships also shift during long winters. In agricultural seasons, husband and wife may spend much of the day working separately. One in fields, one managing domestic tasks. Winter compresses that distance. They share more hours side by side, spinning wool, repairing tools, preparing food, sitting silently by the fire. Conversations deepen, or sometimes fade into comfortable quiet. There is something powerful about shared stillness, about simply existing together without distraction. In modern life, silence often feels awkward. In medieval winter, it was ordinary, and sometimes comforting. Now imagine a specific evening. The wind taps softly against the wooden door. Inside, the mother spins wool steadily. The spindle hums in a soft rhythm. The father sharpens a blade slowly with a whetstone. The scraping sound is steady and repetitive. A child leans against the grandmother, half asleep. No one speaks for several minutes, and yet the room does not feel empty. It feels full, full of shared presence, full of warmth, full of quiet understanding. This kind of companionship, unspoken but steady, becomes common during winter nights. Of course, not all households were harmonious. Stress could fracture bonds. If harvest had been poor, blame might quietly circulate. If debts to a local lord weighed heavily, resentment might surface. But winter forced a certain realism. There was no space for dramatic exits, no grand gestures. Most disagreements dissolved into the rhythm of survival tasks. Chores needed completion. Fire needed tending. Water needed fetching. The practical demands of winter left little energy for prolonged conflict. Let us also consider courtship. In some villages, winter evenings offered rare opportunities for young unmarried people to gather. Communal work sessions, spinning, mending, allowed subtle interactions. A glance across the room, a shared laugh over a story, a brief exchange while passing tools. Romance in medieval villages was often quiet and slow. Winter nights, with their extended indoor hours, gave space for these connections to develop gently. Nothing dramatic, just small moments. Grandparents, if present, played important roles during winter. Their physical labour may have decreased with age, but their storytelling increased. They remembered past winters, past hardships, past celebrations. Their voices carried authority shaped by experience. Children listened closely. Winter nights became living classrooms. Lessons were not written. They were spoken, repeated, absorbed. The emotional tone of winter nights often followed the fire. When flames burned bright and steady, the mood felt secure. When embers weakened, unease crept quietly into the room. Fire was not just physical warmth, it was emotional reassurance. Imagine lying in straw bedding. You can see faint orange light reflecting on the low ceiling beams. You hear the soft crackle. You feel the warmth on your cheek. That small flame represents stability, and everyone in the room feels it. There were also moments of humour. A father exaggerating a story for dramatic effect. A child imitating the village priest quietly, causing suppressed laughter. A grandmother teasing gently. These small bursts of laughter cut through monotony. They did not echo loudly. They rose, softened, and faded into warmth. Winter nights were not joyless. They were simply subdued. Now let us consider something modern audiences rarely experience: collective sleep. Most medieval families slept in close proximity. Breathing patterns synchronized. Movements overlapped. A child waking from a dream would not be alone in a dark room. They were surrounded by familiar shapes and sounds. This created a sense of security. Fear of darkness was softened by shared presence. Even in harsh winters, emotional isolation was rare within households. Loneliness existed, especially for widows or solitary individuals. But within family cottages, closeness dominated. Yet closeness also meant constant awareness. If one person was restless, others noticed. If someone cried quietly, it did not go unheard. Privacy in grief was limited, but so was solitude in sorrow. Winter nights amplified emotional signals. Subtle changes were visible in firelight. Tone shifts were audible in confined space. This awareness could build empathy, or irritation, or both. Let us slow once more. Imagine the cottage at the quietest hour of night. The family asleep, breathing steady, the fire nearly out. Two parents lie awake briefly, not speaking, just listening to their children breathe. In that silence, they feel responsibility deeply. Winter reminds them of fragility, of how much depends on cooperation, of how small their world is, and how important it feels. These quiet midnight reflections likely occurred more often than recorded history tells us, because such moments leave no written trace, but they shaped human experience deeply. Winter nights for medieval peasants were a test of endurance, but they were also a season of connection forged not by entertainment or travel, but by shared stillness, shared hunger, shared warmth, shared survival. When spring finally came, relationships carried the memory of those long nights, of working side by side, of sitting close to flame, of enduring cold together. The cottage is quiet now, the fire is steady, but tonight we step outside, not far, just beyond the wooden door, because winter nights were not only lived inside individual homes, they were also felt across the entire village. A medieval village in winter darkness was a different world from its summer self. Let us walk slowly into it. It is just after sunset. The sky has turned from pale grey to deep blue. Smoke rises from low thatched roofs, drifting upward in thin, uneven streams. The smell of wood smoke hangs in the air, sharp, earthy, and slightly sweet. Snow covers the ground, flattening the familiar paths between cottages. In warmer seasons, children run here. Chickens scatter, dogs bark loudly. But in winter evenings, the village grows still much earlier. Doors close quickly to preserve warmth. Wooden shutters are secured. The last person returning from the well moves carefully across icy ground. Then darkness settles. There are no street lamps, no lanterns hanging along pathways, only faint firelight leaking from cracks in shutters. From a distance, the village looks like scattered glowing embers on a white field. Each cottage contains its own small world of warmth. Between them stretches cold silence. Sound behaves differently in winter. Snow absorbs echoes. Air is dense and crisp. A single cough from one cottage may travel farther than expected. A dog barking on the edge of the village seems louder. If wind moves through bare trees, it creates a soft, rushing whisper. But most nights, once families settle indoors, the village becomes remarkably quiet. Not empty, just hushed. Yet winter nights were not always solitary. Certain evenings brought communal gathering. Work sharing was common in many regions of medieval Europe. In some villages, neighbours gathered in one home to spin wool together, mend tools, or process flax. These gatherings strengthened social ties while increasing efficiency. Imagine 10 or 12 villagers in a single cottage. The room is crowded, the air is warm and smoky. Spindles spin steadily in multiple hands. Voices overlap gently. Stories circulate. This is not a party. It is cooperative survival, but there is warmth in shared effort. The rhythm of spinning wheels and soft conversation fills the room. Laughter occasionally rises, brief but genuine. When work finishes, people wrap cloaks tightly and step back into the cold night. Snow crunches under boots, breath clouds in pale puffs. Then each person disappears again into their own glowing doorway. Religious observance shaped many winter nights. The medieval year was deeply connected to the Christian calendar in most of Europe. Feast days punctuated the long season. One of the most significant winter celebrations was Christmas. In villages influenced by the church, midnight services were sometimes held in the local parish church, if travel conditions allowed. Imagine walking through snow at night toward a small stone church. The sky's black and full of stars. A faint bell rings, not loud but steady. Villagers move slowly in small groups, cloaked and hooded. Inside the church, candles flicker along stone walls. The air smells of wax and cold stone. Chanting echoes softly in the vaulted space. For peasants who spent most nights in cramped cottages, entering the open interior of a church at night could feel powerful, sacred, different. These winter services broke monotony. They offered spiritual comfort and community presence, but not every village had easy access to church during harsh weather. Blizzards could prevent travel. Rivers might freeze unpredictably. In such cases, families observed holy nights within their own homes. Prayers were spoken quietly around the hearth. Simple blessings offered over modest meals. Winter feasts, when possible, brought rare abundance. Salted meat saved carefully might be served. Ale brewed earlier in the year might be shared. For one evening, hunger loosened slightly. But these moments were limited. After feast days, winter routine resumed. Let us consider village hierarchy. Even small villages contained social structure. There might be a reeve or local official responsible for certain duties. There might be a blacksmith whose forge was central to village life. During winter nights, the blacksmith workshop likely stood dark and cold. Work slowed significantly when agricultural demand paused. But in some villages, the forge might still glow faintly if urgent repairs were needed. The sight of a forge fire at night would be striking, brighter and louder than any cottage hearth. Metal striking metal echoes sharply in cold air. Sparks rise briefly before vanishing. Then silence returns. Occasionally winter nights brought unexpected events. A traveller seeking shelter. Footsteps crunching toward the village late in the evening. Dogs barking in response. Hospitality was valued, but resources were limited. The village might debate quietly. Who can host this stranger? Is he trustworthy? Does he carry news? Travellers brought stories from distant towns, news of market prices, rumours of wars or royal decrees. Winter nights, otherwise predictable, could shift suddenly when new information arrived. After the traveller slept, villagers would whisper among themselves about what they had heard. Speculation filled the dark. Now let us imagine a harsher scenario. A storm intensifies after nightfall. Wind roars across open land, pushing snow sideways. Roofs creak. Loose shutters bang. Within cottages, families sit tensely, listening. But across the village, everyone is experiencing the same storm simultaneously. That shared awareness creates invisible connection. Even without seeing neighbours, villagers know others are awake, tending fires, checking doors, calming children. In this way, winter nights fostered a sense of collective endurance. Everyone faced the same cold, the same wind, the same darkness. Sometimes tragedy touched entire communities. If illness spread through the village, winter nights became heavy with concern. Candles might burn longer in certain cottages where someone lay sick. Neighbours would notice. Whispers passed quietly during daytime tasks. At night, prayers were offered not just for one household, but for many. Medieval communities were tightly interwoven. Loss affected everyone. If a villager died during winter, burial might be delayed until ground softened. The body could be kept in cold storage, often within a sheltered area. This reality made winter mortality particularly sombre. Dark nights carried reminders of fragility. Yet alongside hardship, winter nights also preserved traditions older than written records. Folk customs lingered quietly. In some regions, people believed certain winter nights held special spiritual meaning. Nights when boundaries between worlds felt thinner. Stories of spirits wandering snowy roads circulated softly around hearths. Not necessarily with fear, but with caution. Children were warned not to wander far after dark. Adults stayed close to home. These beliefs added texture to winter silence. When wind howled across open fields, imagination filled gaps. Let us pause outside again. Stand at the centre of the village green, now covered in snow. No footprints except a few leading between cottages. The well stands frozen. The small wooden cross or marker near the church casts a faint shadow under moonlight. The entire village feels suspended, like time has slowed, like the world beyond these few homes has vanished. In medieval times, for many peasants, the village truly was the world. Few travelled far in their lifetime. Winter intensified that isolation. It created a feeling of enclosure, both protective and limiting. Inside each cottage, life continues quietly, but together these small rooms form a network of shared survival. If one house catches fire, others respond immediately. Fire in winter is both lifeline and threat. Snow may help prevent spread, but wind can carry sparks dangerously. Night fires were feared deeply. Villagers remained alert for unusual glows or smoke patterns. Mutual dependence strengthened awareness. Now imagine dawn approaching after a particularly long night. Before light appears, the village is at its most silent. No roosters yet. No tools striking, just the faintest grey line on the horizon. Inside cottages, embers are stirred. Doors creak open slightly to test the air. Smoke begins to rise again from chimneys or roof vents. One by one, signs of life return. Another night survived. Another collective endurance complete. Winter nights shaped village identity. They reinforced cooperation. They reminded people of shared vulnerability. They encouraged storytelling, faith, and mutual watchfulness. Unlike modern cities glowing endlessly with artificial light, medieval villages surrendered completely to darkness each evening. And in that darkness, communities learned to trust one another quietly, not loudly, not ceremoniously, but steadily. Settle yourself once more. The snow outside reflects a pale glow from the moon. The air feels even colder tonight. The fire inside the cottage burns quietly, steady, patient, faithful. We have walked through ordinary winter nights. We have endured harsher cold. We have stood in the silent village. Now we arrive at the deepest point of winter, the longest night of the year, the winter solstice. For medieval peasants across much of Europe, the winter solstice was not described in scientific terms. They did not speak of axial tilt or astronomical measurements, but they noticed the darkness. They felt it. In late December, daylight seemed almost fragile, a short, pale window between long stretches of shadow. Morning light arrived slowly and faded quickly. Work outdoors was limited not just by cold, but by time itself. And then came the night that stretched just a little longer than all the others. Imagine the village on the day of the solstice. The sky's grey and low. Frost clings to fences. Breath clouds linger in the air. People may not use the word solstice, but they understand the rhythm of seasons deeply. Agricultural life depends on awareness of sun cycles. They know this is the turning point, the darkest point, and after this, light will begin its slow return. But on this night, darkness feels complete. As the sun disappears early behind distant hills, the cold intensifies quickly. Without sunlight, warmth drains from the earth. The sky deepens into indigo far sooner than in summer. Families retreat indoors before they feel fully ready. It is not yet late, but it is already night. The psychological weight of early darkness settles gently, not frightening, but heavy. Inside the cottage, preparations for this particular evening may be slightly different. Even among poor peasants, certain traditions lingered from older seasonal customs, some rooted in Christian practice, others inherited from earlier local beliefs. Extra care might be given to keeping the fire strong. A larger log, saved carefully, could be placed on the hearth. The idea is simple. Light must endure the longest darkness. The flame becomes symbolic, whether consciously or not, a quiet defiance against winter. Meals on this night, if possible, might be slightly better than usual. A small portion of preserved meat, a thicker porridge, perhaps ale shared carefully among adults. It is not lavish, but it marks the evening as different. Children sense it. There is anticipation, not excitement in a modern festive sense, but awareness. Something meaningful is happening in the cycle of the year. Let us slow down and sit beside the hearth. The fire crackles softly. The room glows orange and gold. Outside, darkness is absolute. Without moonlight, snow no longer shines. It becomes a flat shadow across the land. The wind moves gently, brushing against thatched roofs. Inside, conversation is quiet but thoughtful. The father may speak about how, from tomorrow onward, days will grow longer. The grandmother may nod knowingly. She has seen many winters turn this way. The children listen, trying to imagine sunlight stretching further each day. Hope during medieval winters was not dramatic. It was gradual, measured in minutes of light. Now imagine stepping outside for a moment on this longest night. The cold hits instantly. It feels sharper than usual, perhaps because of how still the air is. The sky is incredibly clear. Stars appear brighter in winter due to crisp air and early darkness. They seem endless. Without modern light pollution, the Milky Way spreads clearly across the sky. For a medieval peasant, the heavens were vast and mysterious. Constellations held stories, religious meaning, agricultural guidance. Standing alone under that sky on the longest night might feel humbling, small, yet connected to something immense. Back inside, shadows flicker along walls. The firelight dances gently. Children grow sleepy. Adults speak in lower tones. There is a subtle emotional shift on this night. The deepest darkness has arrived, and it will not grow deeper. This knowledge, whether expressed in prayer, story, or simple recognition, brings quiet comfort. The turning has begun, even if it cannot yet be seen. In some regions, people believed that the solstice night held spiritual significance. It was a threshold, a hinge in time. Old folk customs sometimes involve symbolic gestures, bringing greenery into the home, lighting additional candles if available, or speaking blessings over the hearth. Not grand rituals, small acts, ways to mark the transition. Even the act of staying awake slightly longer than usual could feel meaningful, as though witnessing the turning of the year. But for most peasants, practicality still ruled. The cold did not pause for symbolism. Livestock still needed feeding before nightfall. Water still required breaking ice. Wood still needed rationing. The solstice was woven quietly into ordinary routine. That is what makes it powerful. The most cosmic turning point of the year, experienced inside a small, smoky cottage. Let us imagine the quietest moment of this longest night. It is deep past midnight. The fire has burned low but steady. Everyone is asleep. Breathing rises and falls in a shared rhythm. Outside, frost thickens. No wind moves. The village is utterly silent. This is the deepest darkness of the year. And yet, in that stillness, change has already begun. The earth has tilted just slightly back toward light. No one inside the cottage sees it. No one feels it physically. But it is happening. That hidden change mirrors much of medieval life. Growth beneath soil, faith without visible proof, patience in long waiting. Now consider how differently modern people experience the solstice. Electric lights erase the sense of lengthened night. Calendars announce dates precisely. But for medieval peasants, awareness came through sensation. They felt how little daylight remained. They noticed how early shadows fell. They sensed the heaviness. And so the solstice was less about celebration and more about endurance reaching its deepest point. As days slowly lengthened after this night, the change was almost imperceptible. One extra minute of light, then another, gradual, but psychologically important. Winter no longer felt endless. The sun's return, though faint, became certain. Winter nights remained cold and long for weeks still, but something invisible had shifted. Hope was no longer theoretical, it was astronomical. Inside the village, routines continued, but conversations subtly changed. People spoke about spring planting again, about repairs that would be needed when thaw arrived, about lambing season, about seeds stored carefully. The solstice quietly reopened imagination toward the future, even as snow still lay thick outside. Let us rest again in the cottage. The fire glows warmly. The longest night has passed. Morning will arrive, pale and slow. A thin grey light will filter through cracks in the shutters. It will look almost the same as yesterday's dawn, but it will carry something different. The promise, small but real, that light is returning. Winter nights for medieval peasants were not only about hardship, they were about cycles, darkness teaching patience, light teaching renewal. The solstice marked the pivot point of that lesson. The fire is smaller now. The air inside the cottage feels dry and tired. Outside, the snow is no longer fresh and bright, but grey at the edges, hardened by weeks of cold. We have passed the longest night. The sun has begun its slow return. And yet, this part of winter, late winter, was often the hardest of all. Let us move slowly into it. By late winter, something subtle changes. The excitement of early snowfall is long gone. The solemn turning of the solstice has passed. The novelty of confinement has faded. What remains is endurance. Food stores, once stacked carefully in autumn, are now noticeably smaller. Grain bins echo faintly when scooped. Root cellars contain fewer vegetables. Salted meat hooks hang emptier. This period, known in later centuries as the Hungry Gap, was often the most difficult stretch of the year for medieval peasants, not because storms were always worse, but because supplies were thinner. Imagine opening a wooden storage chest that once felt heavy and secure. Now it feels lighter. The father runs his hand through remaining grain slowly. He calculates silently. How many weeks until early greens appear? How long before hens lay more reliably? How much longer until the ground softens enough for planting? Late winter nights carry this quiet arithmetic. Every meal is measured more carefully. Porridge becomes thinner, bread smaller, stews stretch with water. Hunger does not always mean starvation. It means constant awareness, a low ache that never fully disappears. Inside the cottage, the mood changes subtly. There is less storytelling, less laughter. Energy is lower. Bodies burn calories simply to stay warm, yet intake is reduced. Children grow quieter. Adults move more slowly. The fire burns lower too. Wood supplies have also shrunk. Each log is precious. The father may choose smaller pieces at night, conserving what remains for colder days. The room feels slightly cooler than earlier in winter. Blankets are pulled tighter. Late winter nights also feel longer in a different way. Not because they are astronomically longer, in fact they are shortening, but because fatigue accumulates. Weeks of cold wear down the body. The air inside the cottage grows stale. Clothing feels worn. Straw bedding is flattened and must be adjusted. There is a heaviness that settles not just in muscles, but in spirit. And yet, beneath that heaviness, anticipation begins to stir. Outside, the snow changes texture. It no longer sparkles cleanly. It crusts over in places. During midday, the sun feels slightly stronger. Icicles drip slowly from thatched roofs. At night, those droplets refreeze into sharper points. The freeze-thaw cycle begins, and with it, new sounds enter the winter night. Dripping water, soft cracking of ice, occasional sliding snow falling from rooftops. The village no longer sounds frozen solid. It sounds like something preparing to move, but movement brings new challenges. As snow begins to melt slightly during the day and refreeze at night, paths become treacherous. Ice forms unevenly. Walking between cottages requires careful steps. A simple fall can injure an ankle. An injury during late winter is dangerous when energy is low. Water becomes muddier. Wells may be surrounded by slippery patches. The simple act of fetching water remains laborious. Winter has not yet released its grip. It is simply loosening slowly. Now let us step into a specific late winter night. The sky is clear. The moon is bright. But the air carries a different feeling, less sharp, more damp. Inside the cottage, dinner has been modest. A thin barley porridge with perhaps a few dried beans. No meat. The children ask quietly when fresh bread will be thicker again. The mother answers gently, "Soon." The word soon stretches wide in late winter. It means weeks, but it also means certainty. Because spring, unlike hope in deep winter, is now visible in small signs. Let us consider animals during this time. Livestock are thinner. Hay supplies are nearly gone. The father inspects animals carefully each evening. A weak sheep worries him. A cow producing little milk concerns him. If an animal dies now, the loss feels heavier than earlier in winter, because there is so little margin left. At night, he may lie awake listening for unusual sounds from the shed. The thin wooden wall separating house and animals carries faint noises, breathing, shifting straw, hooves scraping. These sounds become part of late winter sleep. Emotionally, this period tests patience. Early winter had energy, midwinter had symbolism, late winter has waiting, and waiting can feel longer than darkness itself. Yet medieval peasants were deeply familiar with cycles. They had lived through many winters. They trusted patterns. Seeds stored safely inside remind them that growth is hidden, not absent. The earth appears dead beneath snow, but they know better. That knowledge softens anxiety slightly. Inside the cottage, repair work intensifies. Tools are checked carefully in preparation for spring ploughing. Harnesses are mended, seeds are examined, clothing is patched one more time before heavy labour begins again. Late winter nights often include planning, not dramatic strategy, but practical anticipation. Which field will be ploughed first? How much seed can be risked? Will neighbours cooperate to share oxen? These quiet discussions carry both caution and hope. Now, imagine a night when melting increases. Snow outside becomes slushy. The air smells different, damp earth beginning to emerge. Inside, boots are set near the fire to dry. Mud replaces powdery snow. This shift is messy. Water drips more frequently. Shutters are opened slightly during daytime to let in fresh air. The cottage smells less of smoke and more of thawing ground. Late winter nights carry that scent faintly inside. It smells like transition. Children sense change quickly. They notice birds returning, a faint call in the distance, perhaps the first crow louder than usual, perhaps early migrating geese overhead during daytime. They ask questions again. Can we go to the field soon? When will grass grow? Their restlessness contrasts with adult caution. Adults know spring can still deceive. A sudden frost can return sharply. Winter sometimes makes one final attempt to reassert itself, and so late winter nights hold both optimism and guarded restraint. Let us slow again. Picture the family gathered near the hearth. The fire is smaller but still warm. The father holds a small cloth bag of seeds. He unties it carefully and lets a few grains fall into his palm. They look ordinary, dry, small, yet within them lies the entire promise of summer. He studies them quietly. This simple act during a late winter night holds deep meaning. The future fits inside his hand. Fatigue, however, remains real. Bodies are leaner now, faces thinner, energy reserved carefully. Conversations may be shorter. Sleep may come quickly, not from comfort, but from exhaustion. Yet even tired sleep carries a different tone. The deepest cold has passed. The light outside lasts longer each day. Morning arrives sooner, and that matters, even if hunger still whispers softly. In the village, communal awareness heightens again. Everyone knows late winter is fragile. Neighbours check on one another more intentionally. A shared understanding moves quietly between cottages. If one household struggles, others may help, cautiously, since supplies are low for all. This mutual dependence defines rural medieval life. Winter reminds them of it. Every year. Let us imagine the final phase of late winter. One night, the air feels noticeably softer. The sky holds thin clouds. Snow recedes from certain patches of ground. Dark earth appears in irregular shapes. Inside the cottage, a door opens briefly, and instead of sharp cold, there is damp chill. Different, not cruel, just wet. The sound of dripping continues steadily outside. Something is ending. Something is beginning. The air tonight feels different. Not warm, not yet, but softer. The fire inside the cottage still burns, though it no longer needs to fight so fiercely against the cold. We have walked through early winter, through deep freeze, through hunger and waiting. Now we arrive at the slow release, the first soft nights of early spring. Late winter fades quietly. There is no single dramatic moment when snow disappears completely. Instead, it retreats in uneven patches. Dark soil shows through along fence lines. Footpaths turn to mud. Streams begin to whisper again beneath thinning ice. During the day, sunlight feels stronger, not hot, but present. And at night, something has changed. The air no longer bites, it lingers. Damp, earthy, alive. Inside the cottage, routines begin to shift. The fire is still lit in the evening, but smaller logs are enough now. The family no longer huddles as tightly. Blankets are used, but not clutched desperately. Doors may remain open a little longer before nightfall. Fresh air slips inside. It carries the smell of thawing ground. For medieval peasants, Scent was a powerful sign of seasonal change. They could smell spring before they saw it fully. Wet earth, rotting leaves revealed beneath snow, the faint scent of livestock stepping into softer ground. These smells filled early spring nights. The village changes too. Where winter nights were silent and contained, early spring nights carry new sounds. Water dripping steadily from rooftops, small streams running faster, birds calling earlier in the morning, and sometimes just before dusk. Perhaps the distant croak of frogs returning to wetlands. These sounds replace the hollow stillness of winter. The village breathes again. Let us imagine a particular evening. The snow has mostly melted from the fields, though small piles remain in shaded corners. The sun sets later now. There is more light in the sky as the family finishes their simple meal. Inside the cottage, tools have been moved close to the door in preparation for early ploughing. Boots are muddied instead of frosted. The father stretches his back, muscles unused to heavy field labour after months indoors. The mother checks stored seeds again. Children, restless, ask if they may step outside a little longer before sleep, and this time, the answer may be yes. Early spring nights feel lighter emotionally, not because life is suddenly easy. In fact, work is about to become harder. But the weight of winter has lifted. Hunger begins to ease slightly as fresh greens slowly appear. Perhaps wild onions, early herbs, or the first tender shoots in sheltered spots. Livestock step cautiously into fields that are no longer buried in snow. Chickens scratch in exposed soil. Life stirs everywhere. Inside the cottage at night, conversations change. Where winter discussions focused on survival, now they focus on action. Which field first? How deep to plough? When to sow barley? Will frost return unexpectedly? There is urgency now. Energy replaces stillness. The body feels different too, more alert, more prepared to move. Winter made everything slow. Spring invites motion. Let us step outside briefly after dusk. The ground is soft beneath your feet. Mud clings to boots. The air smells rich and damp. The sky still holds faint colour long after sunset, a soft pink fading to blue. Unlike winter, darkness no longer arrives suddenly. It lingers. Gradual, kind. You hear neighbours speaking outside their cottages, something unheard for months. Low voices carry through the evening air. A dog barks, but not sharply, more playfully. The village is waking. The emotional atmosphere of early spring nights is subtle but profound. There is relief, but also caution. Medieval peasants knew that false springs could deceive. A sudden frost might return, snow might fall unexpectedly. So optimism is measured. Hope exists, but it does not shout. It nods quietly. Inside the cottage, bedding is shaken out more often to air in the milder daytime sun. Clothing layers grow slightly lighter. The fire may go out entirely for the first time in many weeks on certain evenings, only embers kept for cooking. The hearth, once the constant centre of survival, becomes less dominant. The door becomes more important again. The world outside calls. Children feel this change most intensely. After months of confinement, they run farther. Their laughter returns more easily. At night, they fall asleep faster, tired from outdoor movement instead of indoor stillness. Their dreams may shift too, from flickering shadows on walls to open fields under sky. Adults notice the difference. They feel it in themselves as well. Winter created closeness. Spring creates expansion. Let us imagine one final early spring night inside the cottage. The fire burns low, but warmth lingers naturally in the air. A window shutter is slightly open. You can hear a faint owl call in the distance. The father sits near the doorway, repairing a wooden plough handle by lamplight. The mother folds mended garments. A child has fallen asleep quickly after a long day outdoors. There is tiredness, but not the tiredness of hunger. It is the tiredness of preparation, of movement, of forward motion. and it feels good. The village as a whole begins to change rhythm. Instead of early retreat indoors, neighbours linger outside briefly after sunset. Conversations stretch a little longer. Plans are shared openly. Communal work will soon resume in full strength. Winter's isolation dissolves into cooperation. Fields will require many hands, and winter nights, once long and inward, will soon give way to shorter evenings filled with early sleep from hard labour. For medieval peasants, winter nights shaped the entire year. They taught patience, they tested endurance, they deepened bonds within cottages, they strengthened village ties, they sharpened awareness of the natural cycle, and when spring finally arrived, its gentleness felt earned. Not given freely, earned through months of careful survival. The air is no longer sharp, the ground outside is dark and open. The fire inside the cottage burns low, not from scarcity, but because it is no longer needed as it once was. Winter has ended, but its memory still lingers in the bones. Tonight, we explore what winter nights meant once they were gone, how they shaped the return to labour, to light, and to life in the open fields. Early spring quickly becomes working season. The first full days in the fields feel both heavy and relieving. Muscles that rested through winter now strain against ploughs. Oxen move slowly through softened soil. Boots sink into mud. Hands grow blistered again. After months of sitting close to the hearth, the body must relearn endurance in motion. And with that motion, something changes about the nights. During winter, nights felt endless. Darkness ruled the rhythm of life. But now, daylight stretches longer each day. Work begins earlier. It ends later. Evening no longer feels like confinement. It feels like release from effort. Inside the cottage, the atmosphere is different. Instead of quiet waiting, there is tired satisfaction, the kind that settles gently into the shoulders after honest labour. Let us imagine one of the first long work days. The father rises before sunrise. The sky holds pale grey light. He steps outside, breathing in cool but no longer bitter air. Fields await. By midday, sweat replaces winter chill. By afternoon, the scent of freshly turned earth fills the air. Dark soil lies in neat rows. There is promise in those rows. At dusk he returns home slowly, shoulders aching. But his step carries purpose. Winter felt like survival. Spring feels like rebuilding. Inside the cottage that night, dinner tastes different. Even if it is still simple, coarse bread, thin stew, appetite is sharpened through labour. Food feels earned again. Conversations are shorter, but warmer. Children describe what they saw outdoors. Bird nests in trees, green shoots in hedges, neighbours moving through fields, life expanding. The hearth remains central, but its importance shifts. In winter, fire meant protection. Now it means comfort. Flames are smaller, smoke drifts more lightly, doors may stay open briefly before full darkness falls. Fresh evening air mixes with warmth inside. The cottage no longer feels sealed against danger. It feels connected to the outside world again. Let us pause and step outside after dusk. The sky glows with fading light long after the sun dips below the horizon. Pink, gold, and violet stretch across the horizon. The village no longer hides in darkness. Shapes remain visible. Fences, trees, the church tower. Even after night falls, there is softness in the air. Instead of the deep silence of snow, you hear wind brushing through budding branches, water running steadily in streams, distant lowing of livestock, occasional laughter from a nearby cottage. The village breathes openly. Spring nights bring new responsibilities. Livestock give birth. Lambing season requires watchfulness. A weak lamb may need warmth near the hearth overnight. A mother sheep may struggle. Sleep becomes interrupted again, but for different reasons than winter. Instead of tending fire against freezing air, families rise to protect fragile new life. There is urgency in these awakenings, but also joy. Each newborn animal represents survival, represents continuity, represents success through winter. Children feel this shift deeply. They are no longer confined indoors. Their bodies tire from real movement. At night they fall asleep quickly, not from boredom or cold, but from play and help in the fields. Their sleep is deeper. Dreams may hold images of sunlight instead of flickering shadows. Winter taught them stillness. Spring teaches them motion. Let us consider how winter nights now feel in memory. Only weeks ago the cold pressed against walls. The fire had to be guarded carefully. Hunger lingered. Now, as family members sit by a modest flame after a long day of ploughing, winter feels distant, not erased, but softened. Its hardships become stories. Remember when the river froze completely? Remember when snow reached the door? Memory transforms difficulty into shared history, and shared history strengthens identity. In the village, communal energy rises. Neighbours work side by side again. Shared ploughing teams form. Seed exchanges occur. Tools are borrowed and returned. Evenings may include brief visits between cottages, something rare during deep winter. Conversations revolve around crops, weather predictions, and soil conditions. Winter nights were about endurance. Spring nights are about preparation. But let us not romanticize too quickly. Spring carried risk too. A late frost could destroy early planting. Heavy rain could flood fields. Medieval peasants knew optimism must remain cautious, and so even during softer nights, there is vigilance. Before sleep, the father may step outside one last time. He looks at the sky, feels the air, searches for signs of sudden cold returning. The scent of frost is subtle. Experience teaches recognition. Then he returns inside, satisfied for now. The rhythm of sleep changes too. In winter, people often woke during the night to tend fire or adjust blankets. Now sleep stretches longer and more uninterrupted, except when animals call or infants cry. The body begins to align again with daylight. Rising earlier feels natural. Darkness no longer dominates half of existence. Instead, it becomes a resting space between productive days. Let us imagine one peaceful late spring evening. The fields have been planted. Seeds lie beneath soil. There is nothing more to do for the day. The family sits outside the cottage briefly. The sky is deep blue. A crescent moon hangs low. The air smells of fresh earth and distant blossoms. There is exhaustion, but also pride. Winter nights tested them. They endured. Now they have sown the future. That knowledge carries quiet power. Inside the cottage, straw bedding feels lighter. Windows open slightly for air. The fire may go out completely for the night. Something impossible in deep winter. Darkness feels gentle now, not threatening, just natural. Breathing becomes slow and even. The entire household sleeps deeply. Outside, the village rests beneath stars, no longer isolated by snow, but connected by open paths and shared labour. Winter nights shaped medieval peasants profoundly. They taught resourcefulness. They deepened bonds within families. They strengthened village unity. They sharpened awareness of cycles beyond human control. And when spring returned, those lessons remained. Every seed planted carried the memory of cold. Every lamb born carried the echo of hunger overcome. Every peaceful spring night carried the weight of winter survived. The wind begins before sunset. It slides across the frozen fields, rattling the thin wooden shutters of a small peasant hut. Snow lies heavy against the walls, packed tight like a silent guard. The sky turns grey early. Winter days are short, and tonight feels even shorter. Inside the hut, the air is thick with smoke. The fire in the hearth struggles. It no longer burns brightly like it did in autumn. Firewood is precious now. Every log must last. Every ember must be guarded. A peasant family gathers close. The father sits near the fire, slowly rubbing his hands together. His fingers are cracked from weeks of cold labour. Even indoors he never truly feels warm. His wool tunic smells faintly of smoke and damp earth. The mother adjusts the iron pot hanging above the flames. Inside it thin porridge simmers, oats stretched with water, maybe a scrap of cabbage. No meat tonight. Meat is for festivals. Winter nights are for surviving. The children sit on the straw floor wrapped in rough blankets. They speak softly. Sound carries differently in winter. It feels heavier. Outside, darkness settles fully. There are no street lamps, no glowing windows across the fields, just endless black. Medieval winter nights were not quiet in the way modern nights are quiet. They were alive with sounds. The wind howled through cracks in timber walls. Snow slid from thatched roofs with dull thuds. Somewhere far away a dog barked once, and then silence swallowed it again. And sometimes there were other sounds. Branches snapping in the woods. A distant cry. Something moving across frozen ground. Peasants did not have the comfort of certainty. They did not know if a noise was wind or wolf. Wolves came closer in winter. Hunger drove them toward villages. Livestock had to be guarded. Chickens were brought inside. Goats sometimes shared the hut itself, their warm breath filling the air. Yes, on the coldest nights, animals and humans slept together. Not for comfort, for warmth. The smell was strong, the floor was damp, the space was cramped, but warmth meant life. The fire flickers lower. The father rises carefully and places one more small log onto the embers. Not a full log, just enough to survive the night. Winter nights could last 14 hours. Imagine that. 14 hours of darkness. Time felt different then. Without clocks, they measured night by feeling, by the rhythm of the fire, by the ache in their bones. The mother begins whispering a prayer, not loudly, just enough for herself. Winter was the season of uncertainty. Food stores could run out. Illness spread easily in cold, damp huts. A simple cough could become something worse, and there were no doctors waiting nearby. A sick child in winter was every parent's quiet fear. The youngest child coughs lightly. The mother looks up instantly. Silence. The cough passes, but fear lingers. They move closer together as night deepens. Blankets overlap. Straw rustles beneath them. The fire becomes mostly red embers now, glowing like tired eyes in the dark, and the cold begins its slow return. It creeps along the floor first, then up the walls, then into fingers and toes. Sleep does not come quickly in winter. You drift, you wake, you shift positions to find warmth. Sometimes frost forms on the inside of the hut walls. Yes, inside. Breath turns to mist. Blankets feel damp by morning. But tonight is the longest night of the year, the winter solstice. Peasants may not have known the astronomical term, but they knew this night felt endless. Old traditions whispered that spirits walked freely on such nights. That darkness was strongest before the light returned. The father stares at the ceiling beams. He thinks of spring, not because it is near, but because hope is necessary. Spring means soil thawing, seeds planted, work returning, life returning. Winter nights were not just cold, they were tests of patience. The fire shrinks smaller. A gust of wind pushes smoke back down the chimney. The hut fills briefly with thicker haze. The children stir. The father covers the embers with ash to preserve heat. He has done this every winter since he was young. His own father taught him. Survival was knowledge passed quietly through generations. No books, no written guides, just memory. Outside, snow continues falling, soft, steady, covering tracks, covering fields, covering time itself. Hours pass. The hut grows silent except for breathing. Even the wind seems to tire, and slowly. very slowly. Something changes. The black outside the window shifts slightly, not bright, not yet, but less heavy. The father notices first a faint grey touch on the horizon. Morning. It always comes, even after the longest night. The mother opens her eyes next. She checks the children, all breathing. Relief is a daily ritual in winter. They survived another night. That was the goal, not comfort, not luxury, not progress, just survival. The fire is nearly dead. Ash and faint heat remain. The father stands, joints stiff. He opens the wooden door slightly. Cold air rushes in, but so does pale morning light. Snow blankets everything. Field silent, village still, sky pale silver. Another winter day begins, and tonight it will happen again. Another long night, another quiet struggle, another small victory if they make it to morning. This was what winter nights were really like for medieval peasants. Not dramatic battles, not grand castles, not famous names, just darkness. Cold, family pressed close together, and the stubborn will to endure.